So as Heather said, my name is Andrew Capral. I'm the co-chair of judging for the Science and Engineering Fair. And I am just, my goal with this session is really twofold. The first and probably the biggest and most important part, particularly for folks that have been around the fair for a while, is I am going to spend most of this presentation talking about a restructuring of the SEFH categories that we are going to do beginning with SEFH 22. And so I'll give a little background on why we're doing that and what we're sort of thinking about, and then I'll certainly field some questions there. And then I will, at the end, depending on how much time we have, I will also just sort of talk through the judging process a little bit, talk about some special cases for projects and how we think about judging for those projects, and then certainly willing to answer questions if people have specific questions about the way judges think about things like interviews and project boards and things like that. My assumption, which I hope is right, is that most of the people in the room are people that have experience with SEFH. Is there, I don't know if there's a way by raising hands or what the easiest way to do this. I don't know what kind of icons you guys have on your Zoom, but is there a way that people could give me an indication if that's not true? If this is mostly brand new people to SEFH, then I'm going to change a little bit the way I talk about it. So if you can use your icons and clap or put a thumbs up or something if you are brand new to SEFH. And I'll just kind of monitor real quick. Okay, so, okay. Yeah, so that's kind of the distribution I expected. It's like 10% of you or so are brand new. And so some of this, just for you 10%, some of this, I know this will be a little weird because I'm going to start this kind of talking about historically what's happened in SEFH, and a lot of the category changes we're making, I'm going to talk about in terms of how they are different from the past. And so if you're brand new, that's not really relevant to you, but maybe it'll give you a sense. And then we will try to save some time at the end to talk through the general judging process. So for those of you that do know a little bit about SEFH, this is probably not going to come as a huge surprise, although you may not have seen these data presented in quite this way in the past. But what you are looking at right now is a visual representation of the distribution of our projects across all 17 of our project categories, aggregated from 2016 through the 2020 fair. I did not include 2021 because for a variety of reasons, it was weird, right? As everybody knows. And then the color coding here is how we group our categories into 3 areas that we use basically for our grand award judging. Our final round of judging is divided into these 3 areas where we award spots for ISEF. So the thing that will jump out to you obviously is that our fair historically, over the last 5 years, our fair has been about half life science, despite the fact that it's only about 1/3 of our categories are life science. So we end up with 5 very large categories in the life sciences, and are only about 20% of our total projects fall into engineering. And so we see this, so for a couple of reasons, we would like to see there be more balance in the way that projects are distributed across our categories. We both in terms of, we would like to see all of the categories be closer to equal in size. And then we would also like to see these 3 larger buckets be closer to equal in size. And what that sort of kicked off for me and for us thinking about what is sort of behind and the kind of reasoning behind why we end up with these kinds of distributions. And one of the things that we started looking at was how, or re-looking at, because it changes over time, is how do our categories line up with the categories at the state fair and at the international fair, and what does that say about how we're thinking about projects and how many projects we end up with in various spots. So we went through a process this summer that involved obviously conversations with our leadership team and our board of directors and a number of category coordinators who lead kind of categories that are relevant to some of the changes that we are planning to make. And what that resulted in is a sort of change that we are going to make for the 2022 fair. So, sorry. So for the 2022, so for starting this year in 2021, but for SEFH 2022, we are moving to a new category structure that is going to move us from 17 categories, the 17 categories that we've had over the last several years, to a 19 category model. And we are the number of categories in our sort of 3 buckets of projects is going to shift from being pretty equal. We had 6, 6, and 5 in life science, physical science, and engineering, and we're going to be shifting to 5 categories in life science, the same 6, or basically the same 6 categories in physical science, and moving from 5 categories in engineering up to 7 different categories in engineering. And I'm going to walk through a couple of the sort of key examples, the key kinds of changes that we're making. And I want to talk through, sort of the specifics around where we're imagining projects moving, how we think that these changes may influence the way that projects get moved. So the first, let me just pause here and actually let me back up and just say, are there any questions about the way this distribution works and how this has played out in the past? If people have any questions or comments here that want me to make sure to address. I'm specifically thinking about folks that have been around for a while. Whoops. Somebody mentioned a couple minutes ago, and I'm sorry I missed the comment, that you can't see the full screen. People are seeing the visuals, right? Okay. Just pausing here briefly for questions. Okay, so, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, guys. So is the goal for more categories to split those that are the larger than others? Yeah, so let's begin to walk through how we see some of these some of this changing. So one of the things that you will notice, so let me walk through some specific examples of how we're thinking about things changing. So one of the big changes that we are making is the way that we think about and deal with environmental science projects. Environmental sciences is one of the largest categories in our fair, and we are going to be dividing effectively we are going to be dividing that category into redistributing those projects into 2 new categories. So environmental sciences was a life sciences category. And in ISEF and in TechSEF, there's no category that's just called environmental science. Instead, environmental sciences projects or environmental projects are divided into two different categories, one which is called Earth and Environmental Sciences, and one that's called environmental engineering. And so one of we are going to be moving to a model where we're going to adopt those two names for two new categories. One is going to be the Earth and Environmental Sciences category is going to be a rebranding or a renaming of our Earth and Space, our current Earth and Space Sciences category, which is, I'll just run back up to the top. Our Earth and Space Science category is currently a relatively small category, right? And so what we are imagining will happen is that our large Earth or Environmental Sciences category, some of those projects will be redistributed to our Earth and Environmental Sciences, and many of the projects that involve things like interventions that have an engineering kind of component. If you are doing things like remediation, if you are doing projects that center around intervention in an environmental setting, those projects will be shifted to an environmental engineering category where that will compete now in the engineering area rather than in the environmental sciences. And so this part of what we're doing here is there's this question that we got in the chat. Is there a competitive disadvantage if students take fields that are more popular? In other words, are an equal number of students from each different field selected to advanced SEFH? And so those of you that are experienced with SEFH, you know that is how it works, right? So when you are in a larger category, we pick one winner, right? One project to advance from each category to round 3, and then we divide up the spots in to our state fair by category placement, right? And so part of the motivation here is that yes, right, equally sized categories are more fair in a sense, or it's a more equitable distribution for the way the competition works. Now, that isn't, we know that there isn't any way to get to complete parity. We're never going to say to somebody, we'll only accept a certain number of projects per category and that they all have to be equally sized. Some fairs do that. We believe that, what dictates whether or not a student ends up in a particular category should be their interests and what they want their project to be about. But we think that by reorganizing the categories, we can help with that equity issue. The other big issue is we want there to be clear pathways for students that do advance to the state fair and to the international fair to know what category at those other fairs should they be placing their project in. And so part of this reorganization is designed to make that transition more clear. So in the case of environmental science, we're taking a category that doesn't currently exist in the kind of ISEF or TechSEF kind of framework, and we're replacing it, or we're moving to a model where we have two categories that do fit in that. So this has consequences. Obviously, when we make changes like this, there are going to be downstream kinds of things. For example, we're rebranding or renaming our Earth and Space Sciences category to Earth and Environmental Sciences, which means there's a number of projects that would previously have been placed in Earth and Space Sciences, not that many, but some that are space science projects. So the question is, okay, where do those projects end up? And so if those projects have an engineering component, if we're talking about space exploration, we want those projects to end up in our aerospace engineering category. If they are things like planetary science, those are projects that should end up in our physics and astronomy. So our definition, and this is also the way that ISEF and TechSEF thinks about astronomy. The definition of astronomy is are projects that exist outside of Earth, right? So anything in space is astronomy in terms, again, unless it has an engineering or a space exploration kind of component, and that could end up in aerospace engineering. The other thing that I want to mention here, because I think it's important, there you could end up with a question that says, why not just go to a straight adoption of the 22 categories that are defined by TechSEF or by ISEF? And I wanted to share a little bit of our logic there as well. Our fair is situated within Houston. We think that that's important, and there is something special about competing in SEFH. It is not simply the next level down of a larger structure that needs to be identical. And one place that really highlights that is aerospace engineering. So there is not those of you that know TechSEF or know ISEF, you'll know there is not a named category called aerospace engineering. Aerospace engineering sits within engineering mechanics at those levels. We have decided as a fair, for example, that we think it's important that our fair have a separate place. We get a disproportionate number of projects that end up in aerospace engineering. I'm sure everyone can completely understand why that would be the case, right? Houston is in many ways, home, one of the homes of aerospace engineering, right, in the country. And so we make choices like that because there are things and there are topics that are of particular interest and importance to our fair. And so we've made some decisions to highlight those in the categories that we provide. Any questions about this specific change? I've got a couple more of these changes that I want to highlight and talk through, but I'm going to pause at the end of each one to give people an opportunity to ask questions and talk through the logic.
Can you please scroll down to the slide? I cannot see the bottom part.
There's no.
I can only see aerospace engineering, and there are two other red boxes in environmental engineering, aerospace engineering, and I just don't see anything below there.
If you go up to the top, Lufthansa, under view options, you should be able to change the ratio, and you can shrink it to a smaller ratio. That might help.
Yeah, and I'm just to make sure that we're clear, the bottom of the last thing on the bottom of my slide says aerospace engineering, and then there's a parentheses AERO. Are you seeing that box?
No, I don't.
Okay. I can try. Not entirely sure how to fix that for you. One thing I can do is I'll make sure that this presentation is available so that you can take a look at it later. I can also try. I could try pulling the presentation over this way so that it's not in full. I'm fine doing that. Is that any better? Are you seeing?
Yes, yes.
Is that still work for everyone else where you can kind of see the whole enough of it that it's clear? I'm happy to use that view if it's better. Okay, so yeah, any substantive questions about the way we're thinking about the changes here?
So a project in the computer science field, where would it fit?
Good. Okay, so yeah, let me go on to the next sort of thing that we're thinking about. So The next change that I want to highlight is the transition away from computer science as a named category to systems, software, and embedded systems. So, so the way the names that ISEF and TechSEF and I guess it's the ISEF categories that TechSEF has adopted. What you would think of as, well, what you probably would think of as traditional computer science projects are actually called systems software in the sort of the definitions from ISEF. Those are projects that deal with user interface, database structure, sort of front end and back end kinds of development projects would sit inside system software. There are two other places where a computer science project might end up, and I want to highlight this because we do see a little bit of sort of all over the place it's happening in the way projects get categorized. So one is, what are embedded systems? So embedded systems are places that use signals to transfer information. This is a new engineering category that you could think of. Circuits would be in here. It will draw, we believe it will draw projects from both computer science if they have a sort of engineering component. This would be if you're doing things around networks and sort of infrastructure in that way. Anytime you are using electricity, optics, methods of transmitting information or transmitting signals, that in an engineering sort of environment, that's an embedded systems project. Those are, we believe most of the existing computer science projects will end up in system software, but we do know that there are computer science projects that occasionally get listed in computer science, but what they're actually doing is something closer to like electrical engineering or a kind of signal processing that would belong in embedded systems. We also think that there are some projects that exist right now in our engineering, electrical, mechanical, civil category, which will be renamed engineering mechanics. And most of the projects that exist in that current category are civil engineering and mechanical engineering. And so they will stay sort of in that category. And then, but we know that there are some of those projects, a relatively small number, that will also sort of be shifted over to embedded systems. And then the other thing I want to mention, because this does come up occasionally, robotics and intelligent machines. Most of the projects that end up in robotics and intelligent machines are actually, people read the first word and sort of stop there. And that's robotics, right? So it's like if a kid wants to build a robot, right, or something in that nature, they often end up in this category. And what I just want to remind you all to help remind your students is that if you are doing things like machine learning, right, that's an intelligent machines project. So you want to keep your eye on, I mean, obviously there's a computer science kind of component there, but you want to, if you're doing a project that is primarily around machine learning, you want to think carefully about whether or not it makes sense in computer science or in robotics and intelligent machines. The other thing I want to say about machine learning that is starting to happen with greater frequency is we're seeing machine learning as a method that's applied to a broader set of categories, right? So we will see projects in environmental engineering or environmental science or in plant science, right, that are using some kinds of machine learning. And so there is this sort of art, right, to know what is the main innovation, what is the main interest, what is the main thrust of my project. Is my project primarily an animal science project where I'm using machine learning as a method? Or is my project really what I want to talk about with the judge, what I'm going to highlight, the core innovation, the thing that's most interesting? If it's about machine learning, right, then, and you're just using a data set, right, that happens to be about something else, then you need to think about whether or not it belongs in that domain or whether or not it belongs as an intelligent machines project. So that's, and there are obviously, that's an example of something that comes up all the time when you are when you're thinking about how to counsel a student towards a category, but that's one that we see often. So yeah, there was a question. Thank you, Heather. I just saw that the question in the chat. Are there clear descriptions posted? Yes. So I can bring up the website here at the end, but we have the new categories along with brief descriptions and the ISEF subcategories that are relevant are all posted on our website, so that you can go and look at how they think about it. And then there are, for each subcategory, there are more, there's more detailed descriptions on the ISEF website, which we'll post links to as well, so that if people are interested in reading through there's about, there's over 100 subcategories that each in of themselves have descriptions. Any questions about how we're thinking about the movement, the changes we're making to computer science and our electrical and mechanical engineering projects? Okay, so the next, and I think this is the last kind of specific thing that I wanted, changes that I wanted to talk through, are how we're thinking about, we're making changes to a couple of categories that are around medicine and health, and the way that we think of where we would think about putting biomedical engineering projects. So medicine and health is one of our largest categories at the fair. There are a huge number of subtopics that would fit into that could potentially fit into medicine and health. So for example, if you look at our website that lists the subcategories, medicine and health has there are sort of 3 full ISEF categories that are housed within our medicine and health category. So it's a very large set of topics. For a variety of reasons, we've decided not to subdivide those this year. In full disclosure, that's a provisional kind of thing. That's something we're going to continue to examine. But we are creating or we're sort of renaming one of our categories to provide a pathway for medicine and health projects that have an engineering component to be more directly represented at the fair. So we are renaming our bioengineering and material science category to biomedical engineering, and that is aligned to ISEF's category name. Biomedical engineering is a place for projects that have a goal of taking an innovation in medical science and translating it to advance patient health. So that is medical devices, biomaterials. There's a sort of wide variety of those projects, and we believe that some of the projects that have in the past competed in the medicine and health category would more properly be placed in biomedical engineering, because they have a component where the goal is to take an advance in medicine and apply it to patient care. So that's the big change. The other part of the change that we're making here is that we are removing the material science component from the bioengineering and material science category, which was actually, that category has always been sort of an amalgamation of two sort of pretty separate and distinct categories or topics. And instead, we are moving the materials science component of that over to join with our existing chemical engineering category, which is currently one of our smaller categories at SEFH. And so we're expecting in our current bioengineering and material science category, the projects are sort of not quite, but pretty close to evenly split. And so the projects that are relevant to material science will move over to the chemical engineering and material science category. The existing bioengineering or biomaterials kinds of projects will stay with biomedical engineering, and then biomedical engineering, we're hoping, will also pick up additional projects from the medicine and health category to kind of help even things out. This is another place where I want to note, and then that chemical engineering and material science category, and this is more an advisory for those that are thinking about the way they do the counseling. Chemistry is also a very large category in our fair, and we do end up in situations where we have projects in chemistry that are material science related, or are really chemical engineering projects. And so one of the things I would ask you, if you're counseling students on where to be and they have a project that's chemistry, take a close look at whether it makes sense for that project to end up in chemical engineering and material science. We have a question that says, is it completely up to the participants, or will the fair administrators help decide or move projects to the right category? So the answer to that is, we will not. We just, as a fair administrators, we don't have the bandwidth to counsel the 1,000 students or into which category they should be in, but we view that as part of the responsibility of the teacher, the person that is advising the projects at the district level or at the school level. So part of the reason I'm spending all of this time today, like I wanted to make this really the focus of my presentation this year, was because I'm hoping that we can encourage you all to become, or to continue to be, in many cases, active in that process. It is a big part. I mean, it's not a determinant part of how successful a student will be at the fair, but it matters, right? That choice has real implications for how they do at the fair. It is, as Susan points out, it's something that they can change up on their own in Scienteer. You can also change that as you move from level to level. So if you finish at our fair, right, there is an opportunity to recategorize your project when you move on to the state fair or onto ISEF. So it's a decision that you're making for the fair at the level that you're competing. And it's, so I mean, I don't think you'd ever want to be, as an advisor, in a position where you are dictating to a student what category they have to be in. That isn't the flavor, but it's important that students understand that that decision is part of the competition, right? It's part of the design, and making your project successful is picking an appropriate category. And I really encourage you to have your students think through the thing that should decide where a project ends up is the content of the project. Does the content of the project logically fit with the category? Because our judges, when they're going in and viewing projects, they will, if there's a mismatch, if the project is not properly placed, That doesn't mean that the judges will, dismiss it out of hand. A really great project can be compelling for a judge, right? And they'll let their definition of what the category is kind of float around. But part of what they are thinking about when they're talking about their projects, when they're looking at their scoring rubrics, they are thinking about, is this a good project for my category, right? Does it, they are experts. The reason that they are judging in that category is because they have a connection to the category, specialized knowledge in that category. You will just fare better, right? If you are presenting in places where the people that are judging your project feel like it fits in with the category that they've volunteered to judge. So any questions about the change, the specific change that I've got up on the screen right now, or about any of the changes that I've talked about to this point, or just general questions? There's a question from Dwayne. With the restructure, where would you expect a bioinformatics project to likely compete? So I would guess that in general, a bioinformatics project would still be in medicine and health. I think if we were to look at the ISEF subcategories, I believe there is one specifically for bioinformatics, and I think it sits right now situated within the medicine and health category. That said, you could certainly imagine a project, there being specifics of a project like that would put it into, well, I mean, there's a variety of directions that could go. I would guess that in general, you would still be in the medicine and health category. Other specific questions? I'm gonna take a break for a second and scan back through the comments and see if I missed anything. Yeah, so I mean, it's a really good question. Yes, I mean, our goal will be when we're recruiting judges is always to make sure that our judges have a broad enough background. Again, the question I'm responding to, it says, given the significant CS background to bioinformatics projects, will there be judges with CS expertise in medicine and health category? I mean, the short answer is our goal is to recruit judges that have expertise in those sort of at the subcategory level. A judge that expresses expertise in bioinformatics would end up in medicine and health rather than in, we would select them into computer science. And we will make it clear to our judges when we're doing recruitment, because we're going through this category shift, we're going to, provide that information so people kind of know where they would want to, might want to end up. That said, this goes back to this question, the same kind of conversation that we had around the machine learning. The more focused on the computer science elements the project becomes, the more question there is on whether or not is the core innovation here, is the core interest here around the CS topic, right? Which you could imagine it moving into, into either an intelligent machines kind of space or into a system software sort of space. How does the restructuring affect the number of qualifiers to the state and international fair? Does that mean we get to send more projects to the state fair? My understanding, and here I'll let Lionel or Heather, who deal more directly with TechSEFH, step in, but my understanding is that the state fair has a a total number of projects for the fair that get to advance this year. Last year, there was some question about that, right? Where they were only accepting a certain number per category, but I think they changed that for the upcoming fair. Is that right, Lionel?
Yeah. So this year they gave us an allotment of how many projects we can send. So the goal is to send our first, second, and third place projects to the state fair this year. So as we shared earlier today, this morning, they allowed us to share, I believe, 54 projects, to the state fair for both seniors and juniors this year. So last year, it was just all the first place projects from the juniors and first and second for the seniors. And so they're going back to their original numbers that they allowed us to send in 2020.
I think it's each 54 projects for at each division level.
Yes, that's correct. 54 at each level.
Other questions about the category restructuring? I'm going to return to, let me return to here so people can see the whole mapping. I've talked through all of the new categories. If I didn't mention a category specifically, it means that category is basically unchanged from previous years. So yeah. And I just to return to, while people are thinking, just to return to kind of the big picture here, we know that we're not going to be, and we're not really trying to be in a situation where we have exactly the same number of projects in all 19 categories. But we do think we want to increase the level of parity that we have between the categories. And more importantly, we want to make it easier and more logical for students when they're thinking through how to select where their project should live. And part of what motivates this is that we just looking at ISEF categories, looking at our fair, it became sort of apparent that did I just miscount? I may have. It's possible I just miscounted. Sorry, you're right. I'm sorry. It's 18, not 19. So we have 18 categories, up from 17. And so the idea here is really to provide more clarity and make it easier for you all to help students make these decisions. We know that with any kind of change that there's going to be a transition phase. We're happy. I'm happy to answer questions and engage with folks if people want to talk through. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know why I got 19 into my head.
Well, you weren't wrong. I mean, when we were first starting to talk about the restructuring, it was 19. So
yeah, that's right. I just didn't update when we made our final decision. To clarify, although one category can cover a variety of topics that merge with other categories, such as a genetics project that incorporates CS, the project should likely be put in the category that it focuses on more. If that's the case, what if there is an equal focus on CS and genetics in a project? Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be sort of coin flip kinds of cases. I guess at that, I mean, if it really is a sort of, kind of coin flip thing, I think you would rely on things like, well, what kinds of people, right, would the student benefit most from talking to about their work, right? Do you think that they'd be more comfortable making a pitch to somebody with a CS background or somebody with a genetics background? It's not, and again, we make an effort to make sure that the people that we're engaging with have backgrounds that make sense for the methodologies that would be applied in their disciplines, right? So if we have a geneticist, it's likely that among the people that have a background in genetics, they have some familiarity, right, with the methods that are often employed in their field. And that would include things that might fit in with computer science, but they're clearly not going to have as deep a background as you would find in a dedicated computer sciences category. Do these three major divisions break up where sciences is more pure science research than engineering? Is the application of science? Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to talk about it. I mean, from a very practical perspective, there are different, and this is something that is available, I think should be available on our website, but there are actually different rubrics, slightly different rubrics for science and engineering projects. So the judges are asking slightly different questions about and really those differences center around kind of how you think about the methodology of the project. So are you looking at sort of an iterative design process, which would be, more, I think, what the engineering judges would be looking for versus a more sort of scientific method kind of approach. So that's the practical differences. There are just different kinds of things written into the rubric. The number of judges we recruit per category depends on the number of projects that we project. So larger categories end up with more, or the goal is for them to end up with more judges, because what we're trying to equalize is the ratio between students or between projects in a category and the number of judges. Where can the rubrics for judging be found? I assume those are posted in the participants section on the website. Is that right, Lionel? If they are not, we certainly can post them.
So they used to be housed under the judges section. And I think we were in the process of updating that area. Okay.
So yeah, so they'll be found, they will be available, I guess, within the judges section. We can post them in both places. It's not a big deal. So we can post copies. The most important component of that is not so much the scoring rubric, but there's a set of indicators that's connected to the rubric that gives you a sense of what we're asking in each part of the rubric. How soon will the updates be made? Which updates are you talking about, these category updates or the things like getting the rubric posted? I mean, specifically for the rubric question, that we can do that quickly. We have that document. We can post a version of that document quickly.
I'll also drop the link for the ISEF rubric here. We are aligned with the ISEF rubric. So.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's exactly the language for it is exactly the same as the ISEF rubric. Yes, we're making the adjustments for the categories in Scienteer as well. Okay.
Dr. Caffrey, the changes for the categories, I've already input them in SEFH Scienteer as of earlier this week. So unfortunately, I don't know how schools, when they have their profiles, how that information translates into each school. So if you're not seeing it on your end, please do send us an email so that I can sit down with Russell to try to figure out what that mapping is, so that there is that clear alignment that comes into each district. Granted, each district can choose to either adopt our categories, or they can continue to use the categories that they have used in the past. And if their students advance to SEFH, the students will just have to select the categories that we have available.
Yeah, and again, I mean, just from a broad perspective, I would really encourage you all to think about category selection at multiple levels. So there's the ultimate decision that you're making is which category do you end up, which of the 18 categories do you end up in? But what the subcategory list that's provided by ISEF and that we've included in our category list as well can be really helpful because it provides a level of detail that can help clarify students thinking about where their project belongs. A couple of caveats on that. One is that everyone, it's unstated in our list, but if you go to the ISEF list, you will see it. There is always, for all of their categories, there is an other subcategory that just says like anything that fits within that category that isn't listed in one of our subcategories also belongs in this category. So you should not, students don't, if a student has a project that doesn't fit in with any of the subcategories, that doesn't mean that it's not a viable project for the fair, for either for our fair or for ISEF. There's always a possibility to go beyond what those named subcategories have. And so we don't want students trapped into thinking that they can only fit there. But I think those subcategory titles and the descriptions can be really helpful when counseling a student. Okay, so we don't have, this is sort of what I expected, that this is kind of where I wanted most of the focus of this session to be around, but I do want to spend just a few minutes here at the end talking just mostly for the people that are brand new to SEFH, but then maybe as just a reminder for the rest of the folks. So I just want to really quickly talk through the judging process. So we use 3 phases for our judging process. During phase 1, all of our projects are divided into are seen by teams of judges, 3 to 4 judges that score a number of projects. And our goal is for that number to be the same or as close to the same as possible across all of our project categories. From that initial set, our judges will conduct an interview with the students, and then they'll score the projects on a rubric, and then they will meet with the other judges on their team. So the same 3 to 4 judges look at all of the projects that are assigned to their team. And from that set of projects, they will select something like 30 to 40% of the projects that they're listed, that they've looked at, to move from phase 1 to phase 2. For those of you that are new, and as a reminder to everyone else, this isn't a mechanical process. So our judges don't just score the projects, average the scores, and then pick the scores that are, the 5 highest or the 30% that are the highest scores, and those are the ones that automatically move on. The reason for that is that the way our rubric is designed is that it is good at differentiating between projects that are high quality and projects that are not high quality, right? So if there are big differences between the projects in terms of quality, our rubric is going to spot those. It is not designed to make minute or to identify small differences within projects. So a rubric score of 83 is effectively the same as a score of 81, right? And so we would not want to be in a position where we were saying an 83 automatically is better than an 81, whereas it's much more likely that an 83 is better than a 53, right? And so if there's big differences in the rubric, so the way we handle that is that we allow our judges to talk with each other, to talk through and make selections. Once a project has advanced from phase 1 to phase 2, that project is now competing against all of the other projects in their category that have advanced from phase 1 to phase 2. And those projects are then reviewed a second time by a group of judges, of lead judges and the category coordinator. So a new team of judges walks around, they conduct a second round of interviews, and then from that, they are selecting the place award winners for that category. So first place, second place, third place, those are the projects that then advance to the state fair. And then one of the top project in each category within our fair advances to phase 3 or round 3, which is our grand awards, where then those projects are reviewed again against other projects in the same area, and selections are made for which of those projects will advance to ISEF. So that's the general, and those grand award decisions are made by our category coordinators. So that's the general structure of the way we think about the judging process. At every phase, there is the final decision about whether a project moves on or whether a project gets an award is made by our team of judges making a judgment call, not by a mechanical calculation for the scoring rubric. Any questions about that in general? And then the last thing that I want to talk about, and I only have a few minutes to mention this, but I think it's important to just say this out loud because this is a place where I want to make sure that we're transparent about the way that we think about it for judges, and that's 3 different special cases of projects that often pop up. So team projects, so these are multiple students working together. The thing that I want to point out here is that we tell our judges that they are judging a project, and they are not considering the sort of number of people on the project as a barometer for how good the project should be. So it is reasonable, and we do expect our judges to know that all members of a team are contributing to the team and participating in the team. But we tell our judges explicitly that they should not be holding projects that are done by teams to artificially higher standards because they were completed by a team. The second thing I want to mention is continuation projects. We get occasionally projects from students that are continuing work that they've done in the past into a future year. And the thing that we tell our judges to look out for in that case, first, we tell them that they should be identified by one of the forms, and it's important that those forms get filed. Projects that do not have those forms, but where they're, it's a continuation project that's unidentified, that's a problem. That's a problem for the competition. But what we tell our judges to look for is that they should be scoring the projects based on what has changed, what has the student done during this year for the competition. So they're not judging on the whole project, they are judging on the articulated advance that the student has made from year 1 to year 2. So, and that's not to say that the students, obviously, they're going to need to talk about the project in its entirety, but students should be focused on what have I done from year 1 to year 2, because that's what they're going to be scored on. That's what they're going to be judged on. And then the last thing is regulated research projects. Projects done in regulated environments need to be identified. And what we tell our students is that they are looking for the projects can have been done in the context of broader work that's happening at the regulated research setting, but that the work, the part of what is certified by that form is that the work that's being presented is the student's own. And that's something that our sponsors and regulated research environments have to sign off on, and we are relying on their professional ethics, right, and their professional judgment for the fair. So there's a couple of questions right before I finish up. Team projects are not automatically DQ'd if members are not able to present on the day of the fair. That's yes. So they are not. Well, that statement is correct. They are not automatically DQ'd if all members are not able to be there on the day of the fair. Lionel, give me a thumbs up if that's my understanding for how it works.
Yes.
Yes.
But do keep in mind that on the rubric, there are specific spots for student projects, right?
Right.
And so if the judge cannot make a determination of the contributions of each member, then that is something to be concerned about, obviously.
Yeah. Susan asked a question about, I guess maybe asked just to me, but I think it's a relevant question to ask for everybody. She asked me, are you requiring electronic lab notebooks, or are you accepting either electronic notebooks or physical bound notebooks for the fair? My understanding is, and Lionel, I'm hedging a little bit here because I'm not 100% sure if something would have changed, but my understanding was that the requirement of electronic only was obviously necessary when we had an all online setting. But if we move back to a physical setting, a physical notebook would be okay. That we have not completely eliminated physical notebooks.
Yes, this is correct. However, I just during the session, I did get an update that the state fair is going to maintain their status quo that they did last year for that round 1. So what the state fair had required last year, they will also have a requirement for their round 1 this year. With that said, Dr. Caffrey, you have to make that decision of what's easier, I guess, for your students, right? Maintaining a electronic notebook, or having them just scan those few pages that the state, I think state has a limit as to how many pages they can submit anyhow.
Okay, so I think I'm actually over my time by a couple of minutes. Sorry about that, Heather. I will, yeah, and just one quick, everything that I have talked about here is relevant to the poster context. The paper thing is a different, I'm just gonna sort of say that's not I don't know that much about that because that's not my area. Yeah, but this was relevant to the poster context.
And if I could just to clarify, the poster meaning actually the science fair and engineering project, because we do have a STEM poster contest that is of the art factor.
Oh, right.
To the technical project too. So I just want to make that delineation between those two.
Right. You really don't want me involved in the art part of it. So it's I'm talking about the science fair, what we would traditionally think of as the science fair poster contest.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for spearheading this as our administration has made these changes for the alignment and better of our students as they advance from fair to fair. We want to make sure that they have the best tools available at their fingertips and that they've been put in the right pathway even though that they are choosing it themselves, you can definitely be that guide and that facilitator of knowledge. And I think that's the best course of action to take for that particular role in the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston. So thank you once again for participating. And, we are now at this time actually closing remarks. So, we have completed our 8th annual Science and Engineering Fair of Houston seminar. Boy, did that go really quick already, didn't it? We appreciate all of you spending your afternoon and morning with us and providing and obtaining these new updates to be able to help support your students. Please note that we are always more than willing and anxious to be able to support and help you. If you have any of your schools ever need any type of professional development, we also have professional development opportunities to do that. We can go in face or we can direct that virtually, depending on what your school desires. But we are here to support you, just as we are with the students, because we want to make sure that everyone has a fair and equitable chance to be able to showcase their desire in STEM research. Dr. Von Duin, do you have any last minute commentary?
For those of you that just are coming in, filtering through, just a reminder, I did mention it during the judging aspect that the State Fair did notify me recently within the last 15 minutes that they're going to maintain again whatever products they had asked students to turn in last year. They will also require that to be turned in this year. And so we do recognize that that is a very, very short turnaround time between our fair and the State Fair. And unfortunately, with the tight deadline that the state is giving us, and we are unable at this time to really change our date because of booking issues there with the GRB and space not availability on our U of H campus at this time.
Is there anyone with any last minute questions? The question is, there going to be a Scienteer session today? So we will provide you with that information. Lusania, we can get in touch if you can email us, please, and we will take care of your customized needs for you. Unfortunately, that presenter for Scienteer was unable to last minute make the session. So therefore we had NASA who was able to come back in and to be able to help us in that session. But yes, so if anyone is needing assistance with Scienteer, please do reach out to us at info@sefhouston.org. Oh, where do we know more about the paper contest? And the paper contest, are you meaning poster? I just wanted to clarify. The poster contest is on our SEFH website. This is where students actually create the artistic abilities of a poster and encompassing different modalities of their artistic skills. So, not everyone is that engineer or that scientist. We have others who have other creative abilities, and we wanted to be able to provide them that outlet. And so that is there. And then, the essay. Okay, the essay, yes, is also there at our SEFH website. And so that is a technical paper. Now, in order for them to actually create that essay, they do need to have conducted a science fair project. It's just not pure research on its own. They need to have a science fair project and then be able to base that essay off of what they have did. So this really gives them an opportunity to be really in two competitions versus that of one. Great question. Thank you so much, Ian. Any other questions that we may have in the chat? So also I'd like to thank, because I know that we have a few of our attendees here of the SEFH Executive Education Committee. I want to thank you for your continued support. And, we will be meeting as knowing that all of us are definitely consistently putting you at the forefront of our minds and what is our best course of action to continue to work with you and your students. Despite any particular pandemic changes, historic winter changes, or anything else that is thrown at us, we have definitely persevered. You have persevered and been able to be successful with your student success. So once again, we thank you so much for attending our SEFH 8th annual conference. We will close at this time, and we will love to have the opportunity to see you face to face very soon. Betty, have a great rest of the weekend. Take care.